Hey Mo,
Hey, Ricky, look how fabulous you look. Hey, Val.
I got clammed up today. I'm here with Val,
Hello, everyone.
and we got clammed. We did a shoot today, but
Oh,
the doctor is in.
the doctor is in. Happy Woosah Wellness Wednesday. Happy Hump Day, whatever you want to call it. We are here talking about an amazing and important topic today.
We are really. This topic is so close to all of us, and my favorite line is "Your peace is non-negotiable." And so, our topic today is really how to help your mind help you with your cancer, heal your cancer, like use your mind to heal your cancer. And we have two amazing, amazing people. Laura's been on the show before. She was on our couple show. Remember when she
Remember.
had been Laura Crandon, and
Mhm.
she's the CEO of Touch for Life, a great breast cancer foundation. And she said, Ricky, I really want to do a show about mental health. I'm done. So we're here. And so she brought along her awesome friend, Dr. Kimberly Van
Hello.
Gardner.
Hi. Happy to be here.
Yep, she's a psychotherapist, but we'll let her introduce herself. So Val's here with me. We've been like shooting videos all day. She's here with her hubby. We had a great time. And so they're going to show up soon on whenwetrial.org. But let's get into the topic. Let's get into this topic because
Let's do it, because up to 40% of breast cancer patients, and I would dare say more at some time during the course of their either treatment or survivorship, report that they have anxiety. I talked to a patient last week. She reported that as soon as she walks into the building where she was diagnosed, her body remembers, and she began to tremble and break down in tears, even though she was there to give us a check from the bingo fundraiser that they'd raised $14,000 for the cancer program, right? And she's there in tears. It
Wow.
was a joyous moment because she's like, I feel like trauma, something happened here to me, and I feel unsteady. And I gave her a hug. I said, it's okay. You should feel this way. It's normal. I validated those feelings. But Dr. Kimberly, I want you to tell us your story. Tell us about you. We're going to have Laura tell us about her and refresh us on her story so that we can get into this topic.
Well, I'm a psychotherapist and a family life specialist. And while you might be more familiar with what a psychotherapist does, also as a family specialist, I'm trained to not just work with individuals, but I work with the people that surround the individual in helping them with their mental health needs. And often, as we're making changes in our personal lives, it's really impactful on the people that are closest around us. And particularly when we're talking about issues around mood and depression and anxiety, it's important to have a support structure that is around you, especially when things surrounding anxiety and depression are often connected to a loss of control. I've been in practice in the Howard County area now for about 15 years plus. And in that time, my specialty is with people that have mood disorders. And I work with a number of clients that are dealing with issues around bipolar depression and anxiety issues. And in that 15 years, part of that population that has come to me has been women of color, especially who are dealing with a number of illnesses, cancer being one. And often what I've seen with clients that are suffering with anxiety is sort of this sense of loss of control or the uncertainty of the future. And that often speaks to issues surrounding depression as well. And really what I've often seen as well is this sense of grief and loss. And as part of the stages of grief, the depression is often a key part of that. And as a psychotherapist, it's usually my job to help people sort of recognize what those emotional experiences are for them. But that emotional experience is often tied to a thinking process. And so when we're talking about cancer patients, you might have those feelings of anxiety, those feelings of depression. What is very unique are the thought patterns that are connected to those emotions. and sort of helping clients to recognize what is at root and what's feeding those emotional experiences for them, and identifying in my field the beliefs that are driving those moods and those feelings are very key. So as a cognitive behavioral specialist, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the thought patterns that individuals have, and those thought patterns often then feed into emotions. But then we're also looking at behavioral patterns that are often used as coping mechanisms to make adjustments around those emotions and those thoughts and those beliefs. And so I'm also looking at behavioral patterns. And the struggle many times when you're dealing with cancer, or you're dealing with a life situation that has that uncertainty and a sense of like hopelessness around it, and you're struggling with anxiety and depression. In an attempt to cope, people hold on to behaviors sometimes that are not necessarily the most productive.
Ooh, I want to get
part-
into that.
Yeah.
And so then part of the therapy process is helping someone to hold on to behavioral patterns that can help them to cope in a more active, productive manner. And so that is sort of where my work lies. It's sort of helping people identify the beliefs and the thoughts and those cognitive patterns that kind of feed into the feelings of depression and anxiety. And so we're working a lot on thought patterns. We're really putting a lot of work into that. And I'll probably talk more about it as we go a little further on today. But then we're also focused on developing skills to manage distress of just dealing with the diagnosis, and coming up with more helpful skills to manage that stress.
All right, we're going to circle back to all of that because we got to go over some of the ways, the unhealthy ways we deal with stress. I want to talk about some of the unhealthy thought patterns. Let's hear Laura. I want you to weigh in and tell us your story. Tell us some of your thoughts and your thought patterns, and then we're going to circle back because people are watching their feelings.
Sorry, that's my dog. It thinks it's time to talk. So I was diagnosed back in 2016 with triple positive breast cancer. Went through the whole, I hit the jackpot, so to speak. So I had neoadjuvant chemotherapy. I'm sorry, just a second.
He wants to be on the show, right? Right.
Yeah. Taking the place of your pup. Where's your pup?
I know.
Yeah, thank you.
Where's Harper?
So I had neoadjuvant chemo. I had surgery and radiation, and had received a diagnosis of NED, no evidence of disease. I thought I was in the clear. And in 2018, had a really bad headache that I never had before. Thought it was a hangover because we had just come from my brother-in-law's birthday. And it turned out that the cancer had metastasized to the brain. So I had brain surgery. And then 6 weeks later, I was swimming in the Zambezi River in Zambia. And then it came back again. But I went into a clinical trial, and the clinical trial is what really extended my life. It gave me enough time to have the right therapy for me be developed and released and approved by the FDA to give me enough time to be on the latest drug, which is fantastic. So I'm a big fan of participating in clinical trials. And then how I came to think about, how do I do something with the pain that I've experienced to have purpose out of this pain is when I founded Touch for Life. I've also lost two good friends who had de novo metastatic disease, and it was too late to do anything about it. And so it was important to me to do something, particularly for Black and BIPOC women, to have a realization and education, advocacy, and participation in drug therapies that would work for them. And so that's how I started Touch for Life, and connected with, of course, Ricky, who does fantastic work in this area. and I'm very happy to be here. And so I'm living a very full and fulfilling life on this latest drug therapy. And I get scanned every 3 months. So there's that scanxiety that comes about. So you kind of relive it the way that I think about breast cancer, whether it's a new acute diagnosis or you've been years out, is that it's a chronic condition. And that's something that weighs on your mind at times, whether it's going to come back, is it going to kill me, what's it going to do? And so I think there's such an important body of work to be done to connect breast cancer patients with therapists who specialize in people who have illnesses and from a mental health perspective. And I'm sure you'll ask more about how I came to that decision, but I just wanted to stop there and say, that's my story. And I'm very grateful to be here and to use my life story to help and change others.
So just to clarify for everybody, Laura is metastatic and you are still currently in a clinical trial on clinical trial meds, right?
Well, I was on the clinical trial, and then when it looked like there could be a recurrence, that really kicked me out of the clinical trial,
Okay.
which I was really nervous about. But it turns out it was the right thing for me. But they still had I was in a clinical trial for about 1.5 years.
Okay.
And so now I'm on the drug therapy. That was before the drug therapy that I'm on now. It wasn't yet approved by the FDA. And then it got approved and I am on that therapy right now.
So you
Wow.
basically are, that's great. And, we keep trying to, kind of explain what clinical trials are and how they work. So here's an example of a patient that was in a trial, started to show some progression of disease. So they took her out of the trial, but then the drug got approved. And now
So they were able to put her on the trial drug. Exactly right. Yeah.
How cool is that, right? So you made science happen and we have to advance the science for Black women, Laura. So thank you for that work that you're doing. And we share a name Touch, but I think that, clearly there's anxiety. I think one of the hardest things, like when I got diagnosed and my nurse navigator said, Ricky, you are so stressed out, you need to get the stress out of it. I was like, well, I don't believe in stress. What are we going to do? I'm a Black woman. I take care of everybody. Like, I don't believe in stress. Stress is a cop out. So I think a lot of it is there's a stigma about mental illness, but also there's a debate on what it is. Like, how do you know you have it? I think we feel stressed, we feel depressed, but how do you know that it's okay to ask for help about it? Because
Let's ask Dr. Kim that. Let's start with that question. How do
yeah.
you know when you're under stress? What are the
Right.
signs and symptoms for people who aren't
Yeah.
necessarily in tune with their bodies?
Right.
Well, first of all, we need to understand what stress really is. And stress is a perception, to be honest. Like, stress starts in your mind. So there are thoughts that feed a stress response in your body. Stress is really a perception of your situation and the resources and the capabilities that you have to manage that situation. And you can handle that stress there are two ways, right? So you can change the situation itself, or you can try to work on the perception. Now, many times it's difficult to change a situation. I can give you an example of changing a situation. For example, if I'm driving in traffic, I know traffic is causing stress for me, right? I can decide to maybe, commute with someone else, carpool, I can take public transportation. So that's changing the situation around that stressor. But then you can also change your perception about the situation. So, sometimes I'm driving, I'm stressed out, but I have redefined that moment in traffic as a moment to sometimes even have a worship experience and to turn on my music and to laugh and to sing and to have fun. So that's changing the situation. Now, when we're talking about a diagnosis, right, we're talking about something where it's near to impossible to change a situation. Then we're talking about focusing on our perception of the situation. And now we're starting to talk about our thoughts, right? And the thoughts are what are actually feeding the stress reaction. And your thoughts are very important. Your thought patterns are incredibly important, right? Because your thoughts themselves And we know that we think, right? We generate these words in our mind, but when you think about it, it's a very sort of intangible, very metaphysical kind of thing, right? It's like thoughts, like where is that coming from? If you really think about it. And we really don't know. Like we really can't pinpoint what a thought is. It's a very metaphysical, it's not something you can measure. But we do see the electrical chemistry of thought on the brain. And that thought chemistry, right? That happens in certain regions of your brain. And so there are thoughts that we can see generate electrical, activity in the frontal lobe part of your brain. And that part of your brain is where you develop a lot of intentional, purposeful thoughts. And then we can see some energy that's generated in another region of your brain that we refer to as the amygdala. And that is your stress response, portion of your brain. And when you're having thoughts, especially fearful thoughts around things like a scary diagnosis, and the first thought you're thinking is, this is threatening my life, right? That's going to activate that amygdala stress portion of your brain. And the amygdala portion of your brain is really the survival part of your brain. It's a part of your brain that if something is happening that's life-threatening, it's going to pay particular attention to it. And it starts developing a reaction to the fear, thoughts that are developed that are meant to kind of help you out, but it's sort of, sometimes it overworks. And as it's overworking, it's sending an electrical response throughout your body. And that's working through your nervous system. And as those negative thoughts are generated in the amygdala, it goes through your nervous system and it starts to release hormones in your body. And so there's a release of norepinephrine and adrenaline and cortisol, and you'll feel it, okay? Because adrenaline, I think we're mostly familiar with adrenaline. You start feeling the heartbeat rushing or this pastiness, or and what's associated with that feeling are these thoughts that are coming from the amygdala. And do you know how you have amygdala thoughts? I'm going to tell you how you can recognize that you have amygdala thoughts. These are thoughts that are very hard to control. These are the thoughts that are coming up in the middle of the night when you're trying to go to sleep. They're not intentional thoughts. The intentional thoughts are coming from your frontal lobe. Okay, that's someplace else. But when you're trying to go to sleep at night and your mind is racing and it's thinking about a whole lot of stuff, that's a stress response. That's the stress part of your brain. That's the survival part of your brain. And it's working. So you're stressed out. That's actually anxiety as well, because if it's playing and it's kind of like on repeat, you think about it, you distract, you do something else, and then it comes back again. And, you can't stop it, and that amygdala region of your brain, it generates thoughts, they're survival thoughts. Again, they're not intentional. You cannot control them. They can be intrusive at times. These are the thoughts, again, if you're taking your shower and you're paying attention to your bath and that sort of thing, but then in the back of your mind, there's something just gnawing at you, just keeps gnawing at you, and it keeps coming back and it's intrusive. You're stressed out. That's you're stressed out.
All right, Dr. Kim, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Is there a way to, how can people stop in the moment and catch some of those thoughts? How can they catch that record that's on repeat that they don't really realize is playing, especially if it's at in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want you to recognize what it is. Okay. So the first thing is to know that that's my amygdala and it's working. Now there's a difference between being sucked into that and letting it sort of hijack your mental experience. And that's why I'm saying the first step is just knowing and paying attention to the fact that your mind is actually doing that. Like, there it goes again. Like, that's interesting. Now, the moment that you're paying attention to the thought, you're actually in frontal lobe functioning. That's already an
Say that
exercise
again. Say it
of
again.
pulling yourself out of the amygdala and that whole reaction that's feeding your stress and the cortisol and the adrenaline and all those reactions that are going through your body. The moment that you are in a place where you have an awareness that you're thinking, you're actually moving yourself into a space of intentionality. That's in your frontal lobe. And that gives you the power then to manage the amygdala, not to control it, not to control it, but it puts you in that first step of awareness. And then once you have that awareness, you can start to work on intentional, purposeful, more meditative thought that you can use to challenge those stress reaction thoughts, those fear reaction or anxiety reaction thoughts. But that would be the first step. I mean, I could say more, but.
So how do you get there? How do you get there to the
Yeah.
point where you can manage it? Does your body take you there naturally, or can,
Oh,
if
no.
you're not really thinking, you're feeling, right? So you're feeling, and then all of a sudden it goes to a place where you can think. So can you say, shut up? Like, what do you do and how do you get there?
So your feelings, right? And so as a therapist, let me just backtrack a little bit. So we often talk about a triangle that you should keep in mind. So you have your thoughts at the top of the triangle, and then you have your feelings and you have your behaviors, okay? And so feelings are usually the things that catch our attention. So you're upset, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're sad, you're depressed, you're feeling hopeless. Now, the emotions, these three are very much interconnected, right? But your emotions are a great place to start because your emotions are rooted in thought, okay? Now, we're talking about, I mentioned thought patterns. I've been mentioning thought patterns, right? And I'm telling you that thought patterns are coming from two regions, which are your amygdala and your frontal lobe. And so when you have an emotion, it's going to trigger off the survival thinking, right? It's going to do that. And what I'm asking you to do is to know that you have these two functioning thought areas, right? And so with your frontal lobe, you're aware that, emotional awareness, that is a frontal lobe function as well. So it's like, I'm feeling sad. And you're paying attention to what is driving or the reactionary thoughts that are being triggered and then are then feeding back into your emotional experience, okay? And so you're paying attention to that and you're like, okay, so what is at root then to my anxiety? What are the thoughts that are being triggered and then are reinforcing those feelings of anxiety? Because as you think it sends the electrical signal through your body, it reinforces more anxiety, and you're caught up in that loop. Now, once you get to the root of what those thoughts are, and a really good way to do it again is paying attention to those thoughts that are coming up that are intrusive. It'd be really nice to make a diary of what those thoughts are so that you're thinking, whether it's, I'm worried about my family, what's the financial security going to be like for the family, or, this situation is hopeless. There could be a number of thoughts, and they're very specific to the individual and their life experience and their history and all of that. But you need to know what your thoughts are. And then, and this is why it's nice to have a therapist as well, because it's nice to have someone who can help you. Because once you are in that emotional loop, sometimes it's very hard for your frontal lobe to really be fully engaged. And this is again why it's important to have family and friends that can be supportive around you when you're going through that type of emotional crisis. But a therapist or a family member, if you can kind of sit down and you can allow them to be your frontal lobe, okay, for you a little bit, because what will happen, and I'm hoping that you're following me, is that when your amygdala is engaged and you're in that emotional crisis and it's kind of looping and feeding into each other, it will slightly take your frontal lobe a little offline. So don't beat yourself up. That is sort of a mechanism that happens in our mental thinking. So your frontal lobe might go a little offline and might not function the way that it ought to. But, and depression does that as well. But if you sit down with a therapist or a family member and you're able to sit down and say that, here are the thought issues that I have, These are the things that are feeding my emotional experience. And the question that you should always approach your thought patterns with is, how true are these statements that I'm saying to myself?
Wow.
Is my family stability fully dependent on me? Is this a complete death sentence for me? You really need to challenge and ask, well, there might be some truth to my thoughts, but just how true are my thoughts? Are they 100% true? What makes them not 100% true? And so it's almost like you start going on a truth searching mission, you know, and knowing that what your amygdala is doing, it's sort of exaggerating a situation. Oftentimes it's doing that in an attempt to save your life and to help you with this survival stress response that you're going through. And the amygdala is your whole fight or flight system. So it's trying to exaggerate things, and it's making it really blaring. But as you write those truth statements down, you really need to sit down and challenge them, and then come up with statements that are more true. And so those are intentional thoughts. Once you've generated statements that are more true, you're using those thoughts with intentionality. And now we're using and engaging our frontal lobes. So it's, you know, when this thought is triggered by my emotion, this sort of survival thought that is grounded in my fear and anxiety and my depression, now I have a truth statement that I can challenge that thought with. And what we're seeing in the field is that if you continue to do this practice of redirecting from an amygdala triggered thought, reactionary thought, to your intentional thinking in your frontal lobe, you start to create neural connections between those electrical patterns in your mind. There's actually a connection, and we referring to it as neuroplasticity. You start, you know, changing the functioning of your brain. But it takes the practice of redirecting from an anxiety thought pattern to a more intentional thought pattern. And as you do that redirecting of focus, you are able to make these new neural, you know, connections and pathways in your mind. So now when the emotion comes, when the emotion comes and the thought is triggered, over a period of time, the intentional thought also comes up. So I'm not saying that you're not still going to have the feeling of, well, I don't have control. My family, you know, is going to be lost without me. But now you have another thought is, you know, my family isn't, I've done as much as I can to keep them financially supported. I have a faith, you know, my belief in God, you know, God will support and take care of my family. And if you're kind of making those connections, the reactionary thought comes up, but then that intentional thought is also going to come up at the same time.
Can we pause?
Go ahead.
Can we do that? Because I just want to do a quick round robin of that and like show that, because it sounds great and it is a good thing to do. It may not be as easy in the moment, or it actually might be. So we're going to start with Laura, and then we're going to hit Val and Ricky. I'll do one, Dr. Kim, if you want to do one, but really quickly, can everybody just give an anxiety derived thought, and then maybe just give the other thought that we're going to try to replace that with. Let's do it.
In fact, that's how I came to even therapy. It's just like at one point, you know, I had Dr. Google with the brain mets, and Googled it and what happened. And it said I had like 20 months to live, right? And I told my husband, who, you know, we've been married almost 29 years. He's my best friend. And I told him, like, you know, I have 20 months to live, like that. But working with a therapist, and that was too much for him to handle. I realized at that moment that even though we share everything, that he's my cheerleader, he's my supporter. And the look on his face was pure devastation. Like, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm hurting him with the words that I'm saying. I do feel this way, but he can't even validate my feelings. He's there to be like, no. And it was devastating to him. And that's when I saw someone who had a specialty in medical conditions. But that thought would come up periodically, or like whenever we would talk about long-term stuff, retirement or anything in the future, I always think to myself, well, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be dead. And my therapist helped me say, is that true? Has a doctor told you that? Has someone told you you have 20 months to live? And I'm like, well, no, I just Googled it on the internet. And so the counter thought to that is, I'm living a productive, healthy life. I feel great. And my prognosis is positive because there are possibilities with drug therapy, treatment, et cetera. And that's how I kind of try to, first of all, acknowledging like I'm having one of these thoughts that like, this is a bad thought, Laura, this is a bad thought. And I try to then take that and turn it around and say, is that true? And it's not true. No one's told me that. I don't feel like I got, a few months to live. I feel great. And that's how I pull myself out of it. It does happen. It has happened. She's right. It comes back. But now I have something to counterbalance it.
All right, Val, what you got for
Yeah.
us?
Me, it's basically almost as Laura with the triple negative. I was told that triple negative is a disease that I'm gonna die sooner than later, and just trying to deal with that fear, and also thinking about medical. How was I gonna pay for this? How was I gonna feed my family? What all these things was coming to mind that was causing stress, and I just didn't know how to deal with that. And I found that dealing with my stress, I just had to write things in a book. I kept things in a notebook. And then once I kept it in the notebook, it would change my perspective. And I tried to think positive and say, you know what, I'm not gonna die. I'm gonna live. And I kept that. I started posting Facebook all over my walls in my house, in my mirror. So when I walked in the house, I said, I'm gonna live. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. I was doing, that's what I did to combat my anxiety and my fear.
Okay.
I think my situation was similar. I think the confusing part for me is when you talked about truth, right? Like what are the real truths? And with cancer, I don't know that we know what the real truths are. When you're told, either you're metastatic or you're going to die, like Laura and I were, I don't know. You don't really know what the truth is.
Yep.
You don't know. And so I think I did what Val did. I leaned on my faith. And so when my doctor said, okay, Ricky, you have 2 years to live, I was like, no way. I can't die right now. I have stuff to do. I got to get my kids through school. I mean, I basically denied it. I didn't accept it. It wasn't a possibility for me. Like, I'm sorry, we got to find something to work this out. Like, what have you got? Like, there's got to be something, she was like ready to say, okay, you're done with treatment. I'm like, no, there's got to be something you can do for me. And I went and found a doctor that could give me drugs that would help me. But I mean, I think the way I dealt with it was just, I didn't accept it. Like, no is the answer. I can't die. Like, I don't have time to do that right now. So we have to find another path. But I think it's hard when you don't know, when there's so much risk about our condition and just just having cancer, being told you're metastatic, we don't really know what the odds are. So, but I do think that our mental health and our faith can get us over a huge hurdle by believing that we're going to be okay. And I think we all kind of said that. We just had to say, we're going to be okay. Like, you're wrong. Like, we're not going to accept this.
Right.
But there's a lot of breast cancer patients who will not accept it. And I just wonder, how do we help them? Because there's a lot of women that don't want to accept that there's a positive outlook later down the line. All they see is the negativity with breast cancer, the chemo, the radiation, their family members leaving them money problems, food problems, kids problems. So how do they deal? Yeah, they just get stuck in that one.
I think there's a lot of truth though. And the thing is, I cannot, when a patient comes to see me and I tell them they have triple negative breast cancer, I can't make promises that I can.
Right.
You don't know
what
but they're right. But maybe that's not the truth they need to focus on in that moment.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. Right. Maybe the truth is that, what there are, like mine, for example, there aren't enough hours in the day. Like, I don't have enough time. Yes, I do. There are enough hours in the day.
Mhm.
There's 30 more minutes to get in that workout. There's 30 more minutes to start doing some writing. There's enough time. And maybe your focus is on something else and not on that bigger picture and that larger question, because we don't know that answer. And that's what's going to drive you nuts. What about my next scan? What about what about this
Right.
lump that I feel that could be a cyst? How do I know that every pain in my back is a metastatic disease? Those aren't the questions and the truths to focus on, because we don't know those answers.
Exactly. And when I'm saying, searching what your thought patterns are and looking at what your perceptions are of the perception that's creating the stress for you, at the heart of that is a belief. And so what we're looking at, even in cognitive behavioral therapy, what we're trying to help people identify are their core beliefs. And when you're talking about spirituality, and especially when I'm working with women of color and people of color, spirituality is core to our belief system. And so as we're searching for truth, the truth is that, and I've said this to cancer patients many times, the truth is that, yes, you are going to die.
Right.
That's the truth. I'm
That's
going to
true.
die too. The truth is that we're all going to die.
All gonna die,
Okay.
right?
And I'm dying and you're dying. We're both dying. We're dying every day. That's the truth. That is true. But let's talk about the truth in a broader sense. And it's like, and what do you know? And what do you believe about death? And so we can start a very, spiritual, very existential conversation about what death is and what's the truth about death. And let's just face it. Let's face the fear straight on. If we're afraid of dying, let's talk about death. Our whole culture is afraid of dying. And
Tell that to my
cancer seems like a
patients
death
too.
sentence,
No,
but
nobody makes it to whatever comes next without going through that threshold. Whatever you believe comes next. You don't
so
get
let's
there.
have a discussion about the truth about death and the truth about life. What do you believe about death and what do you believe about life? And again, thought patterns, the words by which we live by, which are the thoughts that go through our head and the language that we form in our heads, these things actually feed our emotional experience. And many times in therapy, and because I'm a woman of color and I'm working with people of color, it's like we're talking about spirituality. When we're talking about psychology, when we're talking about thoughts, which are very metaphysical, we're talking about spirituality. When we're talking about emotions and that energy in your body, we're talking about the spiritual expression of emotion. That's what it is. It's a spirit of anger, a spirit of hopelessness, a spirit of depression and sadness. We call them emotions, but these are very spiritual energies that exist within our souls. And you have to ask yourself, what are the words that are feeding your spiritual, your emotional experience? What are the thought patterns? Are you living by words of truth? Are you living by words of truth? And there's nothing truer than God's word. And I'm hearing how God's word has been able to be a source of strength, and it's intended to be. But when we live by words that are not fully true, where you believe that death is the end, and if you believe that is true, then there's a whole lot to fear in that. But the question is, what do you believe? What do you believe? What's feeding your stress? How do you perceive the situation? And are the words that you're telling yourself, are they fully true? That's the question. Are they fully true? And let's search, and let's go on a search for truth. In whatever time we all have, let's go on a search for truth.
May I ask Dr. Kim, I guess, and this gets back to Ricky and Val's point as well, what do we do then with the thoughts with the unanswered questions, and how do we frame those in the context of moving forward with our lives in productive ways and not focusing on it? Because what is it about us that has that tendency to focus on the negative?
Well, we have beliefs about certainty, and we have beliefs that we are to be certain. That's a mistaken belief in and of itself. And so you have to sit with that too and figure out well, how certain are you? How certain are we about a lot of things? Like, let's talk about it. You might not be certain about, but what else? I mean, there's a lot. You're living with uncertainty every day. Certainty is not something that we really have. And so sometimes there's an irrational or a mistaken belief around the idea of certainty. And then we need to search for the truth about that as well. Because it's your perception that you believe that you're supposed to be certain. And it's like, no, you're living life with tons of uncertainty. You're just fine. You're uncertain about you might think you're going to die in a certain number of months, but do you know that for certain? No, we don't know that. You don't know for certain.
We don't
But you know, and it's okay. There's a lot of things that we don't know for certain. But what do you know for certain? There might be a few things that you really do know. So what you do know is that you have an illness. What you do know is that there are things that you need to do in order to take care of yourself. So let's focus on the things that we are for sure certain about. That's what you do every day anyway, to be honest, or we can just over focus on this uncertainty. But what that does is it's feeding stress and it's feeding fear and it's feeding, a whole number of cocktails of hormones in your body that aren't good for your cancer anyway. And so now let's focus on the things that are within our scope of control, the things that we have some certainty over. And that would be a much better use of your energy and your time. And so let's focus on that and knowing that, it's okay to live with uncertainty. We all do it's a part of life. But again, that's a whole journey of truth. That's a whole journey of truth as well. And so every thought that comes into your mind that is feeding some sort of something is kind of just sit with it and ask yourself, well, do I need to be certain? Am I certain? What am I certain about? Like, there's a lot of things I'm not certain about. Like, there really needs to be that sort of paying attention to what is coming up in your mind and really challenging the belief. And of course, we can go to God's word about certainty too, because God is certain. And just as long as God is certain, and I know I'm certain that he loves me, I'm fine, right? So we can draw from that strength as well.
I was in that kind of aspect because even when I was going through as a believer in Christ, I believe that when I was first diagnosed, I always said to my kids and I always said to my husband, if I live, I live. But if I die, I die. And that was because as a believer of Christ, I knew that my body it's just a shell. And that if I died, that I was going to go and be with my Lord and Savior in this land that they say is filled with beauty and peace and joy, no stress. So that's what kept me going.
That you had a belief, but again,
Right.
though, to me, that's a belief. That's faith. That's a belief. That's not a certainty. That's not
Right.
but that's what you can make it certain if you believe it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like you can find certainty in your belief.
Yes.
And I think that's where so many people struggle because
Right.
they can't find certainty in their faith. And they lose their faith and their faith is weakened by their situation. And it's so hard. We coach so many women about that all the time to try to get them over that faith hurdle of like, you can believe that God is here for you. You can believe that God's going to take care of you. And I know that, and we've talked about this, Val, too, that I remember thinking I didn't know what to pray for. I called one of my prayer warriors and she's like, pray for healing, damn it. But I knew that wasn't what I needed to pray for. It didn't feel right in my spirit. I had to pray for God's will to be done. I had to pray I had to relinquish my faith and say, okay, God, you have me. So whatever you have for me is what my certainty is, right? Whatever it is.
Mhm.
I had to let go of trying to make something up for myself. I had to wait and let play it out and let God take control and give the control to God.
That was one of the hardest things for me as a control freak. I've been
Exactly.
a control person. Like I project manage stuff. I get things done by sheer will. And I try to control lots of aspects of my life and other people's lives too.
Yeah, we do.
Because I don't think it's a faith issue. I think it's a control
It's a control
issue. It's a
issue.
control.
Yes, I lost
We got to control everything. And this having breast cancer is out of our control.
Out of
We have no control.
Yeah.
So we have to learn, like the doctor said, we have to learn to control the things that we can't control. We can't control.
It's a lesson for me. Like it's been a journey. Like that's what, like people talk about, like what was the worst part of the treatment? And I would say, believe it or not, radiation. Chemo, I lost my hair, all that. But you know why radiation was the toughest? Is because I had to be there at a certain time. Like it controlled my life. Like for 6 weeks, I
Every
just,
day.
Wow.
yeah. And
Every day.
I just felt like I couldn't, it was controlling me. And that's what was the most difficult aspect of it, was letting go of that control and realizing that I really don't have control over most things that I even think I do.
I know
Right.
the only thing I had control over was, I'm sorry, Dr. Mo. I
No,
was,
please.
the only thing I believe I had control over was when I sat in the bathroom and had my granddaughter cut my hair. I felt like I was like, wow, I'm controlling something. So I took charge because I know the chemo was going to take my hair out, and my hair was down to my back. So I sat in the bathroom and said, if I can't control anything else during this cancer journey, I can control this. I wasn't going to let the chemo take my hair out. I was going to do it myself. And that was, I find a lot of, when I talk to a lot of cancer patients, they say that's the only thing that they have control of over what they do with their head.
You know, it's deep though, when I talk to patients about their options, and for patients who opt for breast conservation versus, or lumpectomy versus mastectomy, and when you make decisions that are based in fear, those same patients come back to me after a double mastectomy and they say, okay, well, now we're not doing any more mammograms. How do I know nothing's there? You know, and it's
Right.
not it's not the surgery you chose. It's not that it's the loss of control, but we do try to redirect and focus. I can control what I put in my mouth. I can control what time I go to bed. I can control the quality of my sleep to some degree, or I can begin to work on that. I can control moving my body. I can control. And so I make them make lists of things they can control to try to give to give some motivation, because there's a whole lot of things that you can't control. And you know, somebody put in the chat, and I love that they said this. They said it's okay, it's fine when your faith is a little weak. A little weak faith is better than no faith at all.
Yeah, that's Dr. Ruth, or Ruth Travis.
Yeah, Dr. Ruth. Yeah.
Ruth. Well, you know, this is a little off topic, but one of the things I learned from my psychotherapist when I was sick was that she made me be introspective about being a control freak. Because I am you know, I mean, it's a Black woman thing. I'm sorry, we have the purple cape. Okay, I earned that cape, but I got the crown, everything. So you know, I'm a control freak. But she made me learn that I was enabling it. I was enabling people to be dependent on me. That I was causing it. That I felt like an octopus. That I had like 8 arms. And everybody was pulling on them, and I was out of control. Like everybody like demanding things from me. And you know, I was the breadwinner for my family. I was the rainmaker for my company. But I had to learn that I was putting all those vibes out there to create all these dependencies on me. And when I thought, and that's what I think that was one of the biggest learnings I took away from my therapy during cancer was, right, like I had to let that go. But I had to learn that I was being the control freak, making people be dependent on me. How crazy is that?
Dr. Kim, can we talk about that? Because I think there's a lot of people who are watching who are doing something similar and maybe want to try to figure out how to unravel some of that.
Yeah, how do you unravel it?
A struggle that we have, I think, in our culture in general, and I think there might be a worldview around this, is that women in general have a cultural position in life where we're seen as nurturers, we're seen as givers, and this is across many cultures and world perspectives, right? The idea of especially women that find themselves in mothering positions, and whether it's, you know, being a biological mother or another situation where you find yourself as a caregiver. And the belief then is that we are sort of we are a source. There's a false belief many times that we are the source of support. We are the source of love. We are the source of everything. And there's a reason why many people come on the couch and talk about their mothers. I mean, it's a running joke, you know, that, you know, everybody comes to therapy and talks about their mother. And it's that failure, that disappointment that occurs when we have a false belief that woman, mother is the source. I think as women, we struggle with that as well. You know, as women, we're struggling with this internalized definition of who we are to be. And so It's kind of like, we are the ones that keep our families functioning. We're the ones that we're keeping them going. They're so dependent on us. They rely on us for everything. And it's a very sort of, if you sit with it, it can sound a little narcissistic. It's a little kind of
Okay.
godlike. Let's just
Baked
be
into our
honest.
healthcare systems too, though. The women are the gateway into the family, and if a woman takes charge of her health, she'll bring the whole family with her.
And she
It's deep
There's-
in the culture and society.
And I
It
think
is.
when we do that too, it's
Mhm.
like a sign, like when we can't do everything, we feel like it's a sign of weakness. Like we're not,
Something's wrong with
there's
us.
something the matter with us because we can't take care of all the everyday things that we have to do for our families,
but the truth on that is that you're not.
right? Which causes.
Which also causes
causes
stress.
Yeah.
When you have cancer, you're like, gosh, I know I should be going to the baseball game. Oh, I
Mhm.
know I should be cooking dinner, or I know I should be doing the
Clean-
laundry,
Right, exactly.
right? And you can't today.
Yeah. And the should statements are red flags for amygdala thinking. I just want you to know, if you're telling yourself you should, it's like, should you? Should
Mhm.
you? And that's another thought to really challenge. The moment you're putting that pressure on yourself. And it's like, well, at this point in time, no, you should not. Do the people that love you really understand, and so on and so on. But what feeds that is a belief that I am to be in control. I am in control of the family. I am the source of this. How will they live without me? How will they survive without me? And it has a very narcissistic tone to it. It does, it has a godlike tone to it.
Mhm.
And when you're struck with your mortality and your weaknesses, which are reality, it's a reality, that you are not perfect. You're not the source of everything
Mhm.
for your family. You never have been, never will be. You have been a wonderful resource in your family, and God has provided your family with so much through you. And so yes, you are a resource to them, but in the absence of you, the source still exists. Your family will be taken care of. Your spirituality can be a huge strength, right? In those moments. Now, some people, and I think you've been speaking to this or been hearing this as we've been talking, some people do not have a spirituality to draw strength from, right?
Right.
Right.
They don't have a strong belief system of spirituality to draw from. And so in those moments, as a therapist, where I take someone to is like, well, what matters most in life to you? We can focus on cancer and we can let that hijack our thought process, but you can be intentional about what is driving the thoughts that drive your everyday experience. And so what's most important to you in life? Let's generate what that is. Some people will say God, if God is important, but if God is not important, people say family and kindness and love and a lot of attributes that are very spiritual. If someone is sitting with what their values are and what's most important in life. And so if you are at this juncture in your life where you're faced with the truth about your mortality, because we live in denial in our culture around it, but it's the truth is that we're all dying and we all are here for a limited time. What is most important in the time that you have? And let's focus on what we do with the time that we have. And are we doing behaviors and living a life grounded in our values, whatever they are. So if kindness is a value for you, let's spend time focused on kindness. We can control that. We can control our behaviors around the things that matter most. And let that be what generates your thinking. Let's stimulate some energy in our front lobe and let's be intentional to think about what matters most, what's in our hearts, whether it's kindness and family. And then let's focus on behaviors and time that we have, which we all should be doing regardless of an eminent diagnosis or something. We should be doing this every day and living our life in consistency with behaviors that are most important to us. Remember I said thoughts, feelings, behaviors. And so behaviors then can reinforce positive thinking. We can use positive thinking to reinforce behaviors that generates a healthy emotional experience. And there's a hormone release that works around this too. And it's not adrenaline and it's not cortisol and it's not norepinephrine and it's not that stuff. It's dopamine, it's oxytocin, it's endorphins. it's serotonin. It's
Good
those
stuff.
things that generate the emotions of peace and love. And those are very healthy. Very immune supporting, your immune system thrives off of those hormonal experiences. And once we're focusing on intentional thought that is driven with that intentionality and purpose of life and what value, and sometimes that's spirituality, and sometimes it's just beautiful character, wherever you are. And you let that drive your thinking and your emotional experience, and you create a meditation and a focused thinking around that, it'll help feed a healthy emotional and spiritual experience within your body. It's sending a positive energy throughout your body, which is very different from the amygdala negative forming energy that is feeding a hormonal experience within your body that is very stress provoking. And you really want to do an intentional, and it's not reactionary like the amygdala. So you do have to be intentional to force yourself to do some form of meditation. But often a values meditation is a really good way to start. It's like asking yourself, what matters most to me in my heart? Like, what's really important to me? And sometimes I have people that sit down and say, well, money and power and control. And they're like, okay, well, so let's stick with this. Money. It's
Can I bring up a
Right.
theory? And
Go ahead.
I'm usually not the Debbie Downer.
Right.
I do believe in everything you just said.
Mhm.
But I think when you start thinking about that power narcissism trip as a mom, as a control
Oh,
freak,
right. Sorry.
I think part of that is the fear that, guess what? They probably will be okay without you. They're gonna find their way.
Yep.
Wait, can we talk about that,
And
right?
that like totally pisses me off. Like, right, like, I mean,
Ooh.
but is that narcissism? Is that like, what will my kids do without me? Like, and I started doing things like teaching them to cook, teaching them
Yes.
to do the
yes.
laundry, teaching them to do things just in case I wasn't gonna be here. Like, we made a cookbook of all their favorite foods.
Beautiful.
But it was like, gosh, are they gonna be okay? But they probably are, because something's gonna happen. And, will my husband get remarried? Well, like all these things, if I'm not here, like, and that makes you mad and gives you more stress.
I think, Ricky, because I lost my mother when I was 16, and at 16, and my mother died from breast cancer. So when I lost my mother, I didn't think that I would be able to maneuver in this world without her. But look, today I'm 60 years old, and look, I made it.
And you had breast cancer.
And I had breast cancer, so I made it.
But that probably pissed your mother off.
It probably.
I mean, like,
Your mother's so proud. She like, see, I knew my baby could do it. Proud.
But still, we just have letting go,
Exactly.
that ability to let go of it and say, I
Mhm.
gave you life so you can live it. My favorite line from that Big Fat Greek Wedding, right? That I prepared you for this. But again, it's that control that you won't relinquish
be-
as a mama.
Mhm.
Dr.
And
Mo, I have a-
I'm sorry.
But I'm sorry, I have a question for Dr. Mo. And my question is, as part of your cancer team, shouldn't that be implemented at the very beginning of your treatment? I'm saying,
Yeah.
because I had to go to my doctor and say, I'm having all these issues, I'm having all these anxiety, I'm having all these fears, I'm having all these depression. I went to my doctor, they recommend someone that I speak to, and I also went to my pastor to see, and because they don't have experience in cancer care, but they can give me word from the Bible, just to meditate on. But how do we implement this when someone is first diagnosed with breast cancer?
Love that question, Val. And the answer is yes, we do. We check for it. It is part of the requirements of a cancer program for accreditation and reaccreditation. It's one of the beans that they got to count in the box they have to check, is that we do have to do what's called a distress screen, right? And I mean, let's be honest, when you're first diagnosed with cancer, of course, everything is high on the distress screen, right? And so they give you this little meter and you're supposed to fill it out. It's like those little pain, the happy smiley faces, how's your pain, rate your pain. Well, they do the same thing for distress. Whether or not it is the best tool, probably not. And I think the question that we're asking ourselves now is, when is the best time to ask it? How often should we be asking it? And how often do we then check in with people and say, okay, they scored high on their distress screen, but what is it that's causing distress? And now we're getting to the point where we're starting to pare down. Oh, it's transportation. That's a distress. Oh, it's it's anxiety. Oh, it's this, it's that. Now, from my part, when I talk to a patient, I give them a diagnosis. I do try to talk about these things and prepare them, in addition to explaining what are hormone receptors, in addition to explaining what those words mean on the pathology sheet, in addition to explaining what's the surgery you need, in addition to explaining whether or not you may need chemo, what's radiation, who are my doctors, what are my appointments, all the things. And so I think figuring out the best time to do it and really validating that in a studied way that looks at that and that revisits that and that offers it again, and more importantly, offers something people can afford. Because what good is having access to or having a referral sheet for therapists if none of them take insurance and you can't afford it anyway? Because that's another brick wall we hit.
Where to go, right? Yeah.
And the
Well, I
same,
mean, I would say at the beginning of the diagnosis, yes, I was offered it, but there was just so much going on through my mind, and I had to go through it just, and I had never had a therapist before. I had come from, I got faith, that sort of thing.
I know.
And I think it's hard in the beginning to hear that. Not until when I was sitting in the doctor's office, it was a doctor, the surgeon, the nurse practitioner, and my husband is follow-up. And I started to revisit, like, how did this happen to me? Should I do something different? And the nurse practitioner, not my surgeon, said, that sounds like anxiety. And I was like, what?
Really?
Anxiety, like what?
Right.
And
Same thing with me.
it gave a name to what I was.
Yeah, what you're feeling. Same thing with
I
me.
didn't think it was anxiety. Like, she had to name that. I didn't know that having these thoughts, recurrent thoughts about, could I have done something different? How could this happen? What could I have done? I didn't know that was technically anxiety until she put a name to it and then said, you should see somebody. And then I went on the journey of, I had never seen a therapist. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know. So I asked a friend, one of my Link sisters, who's a therapist, like, what questions do I even ask? I don't even know where to start. She gave me 5 questions for me to ask. And she said, interview lots of people. It has to be a fit for you. And just because you and that therapist don't throw away therapy. It's that you have to find the right match for you. And I started to go through and look at, I guess, Psychology Today, and that you could see I wanted a Black woman because I didn't want to have to explain certain things. And I looked for somebody who had experience with people with medical conditions, because I thought, again, coming from a place of knowledge. And so that, and I started out with 2 therapists because I didn't know what I was doing. And one ended up being more like talking to a girlfriend. I just didn't have any, it just became useless. I didn't have any tools. She wasn't telling me how to manage and what to do once I had these. It was just talking. And I, as an analytical person, I needed like, how do I really address this? And that's when I stuck with the person who was really skilled. And again, it was new to me. And now I will say today, golly, I wish I had a therapist years ago. I really do, because just helping me through not just the diagnosis, but life. And
Someone's asking about what the 5 questions are, so I'm going to tell them to email you.
Yeah, please email me. I've got the questions.
I put the email in the chat, laurakrainatouchforlife.org.
and I think that therapy is also good for after treatment, because after treatment, you're like, what do I do next? What about reoccurrence?
Survivorship,
How do I survive after? Because I was telling the ladies today, I kept my port in me. My doctor was saying, Val, you can get rid of your port. I kept my port in me for 2 years because that was my comfort.
Holy cow.
It was my blanket. It was my security blanket. And he found that, Val, we got to take it out. And I'm like, no, I didn't want my port to, because that was my security blanket, because I didn't know what to do after cancer. And I was afraid, what happened if I have a reoccurrence, and then they're gonna have to go right back into me again, put another port, And I needed that therapy for aftercare because I didn't know what to do after.
So she made a necklace out of her report that's really cool. She doesn't have it on today, but she still wears
No,
it.
I just have on my
Wow.
mustard seed
Yeah,
today.
I know, I know. Oh my gosh, so we have to go, I guess. What a great
What?
discussion.
Oh my
Guys.
gosh.
You
Yeah,
have,
we do.
you have to come back. You have to come back. This is such a big topic. And you know, we'll do another show
Yeah.
about this because it's so important. And I know there's so many questions I still have even to talk
Mhm.
about it because you know, even just the whole survivorship thing. And to me, my doctor named stress for me. I didn't believe in it. So I think similar to you or about anxiety, but I think, you know, we as a community, we need to embrace
Yeah.
mental health and
Yes.
and psychotherapy and psychiatry as something that needs to be a part of our life. It's like if you have a cold, you take a pill. If you have cancer, you do chemo.
Yeah.
Like if you know what I mean? Like it's something that it's okay to talk about, to do, to experience, and to help you with you know, just dealing with life. And so
I think it starts, Ricky, with normalizing our feelings at all and that
Yeah.
we should feel because so many of us, how are you doing? Feeling fine. What's
Fine.
wrong? Nothing.
I'm fine.
Right. And we don't even give ourselves permission to feel anything,
Mm-mm.
let alone process it, let alone seek out help for it. We're still at the point of even acknowledging what is really true in our feelings and that our feelings themselves are valid. And I think we need to spend some time having that conversation as well and teasing out what are some of those unhealthy thoughts, giving them name, giving examples of them, and then trying to actively replace them because that's what people need. They want to feel equipped to think a different thought. You know, I tell my patients, when you go by and you look at yourself in the mirror, do you say sweet things? Right? Because if you don't, you may look in that mirror and you pick yourself apart. You say, look at my this, look at my that, look at my scars.
Mhm.
And we don't, if you don't say sweet things and replace those thoughts with something, what's the record that's playing? And we need to identify what that record is that's playing.
True.
So our next episode about this is going to be called "I'm Fine,
Mm.
You're Not."
Am
And
I?
it's really a dichotomy because as a
My,
survival mechanism, you
Uh-huh.
are telling yourself, like my whole theme was
Mhm.
keeping it moving. That was my thing. I'm keeping it moving.
or I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I'll be
Yeah,
fine.
this isn't happening to me. I got this, no
Yeah, I'll be
problem. And I
fine.
was so busy being that in many cases I never really sat with it
Mhm.
and worked through
Embraced it and embraced it and
yeah, worked through the emotions.
okay to feel. It's
I
okay
just
to
kind of
feel.
had this like wall, which is why in the beginning I didn't tell anyone because I was like, I don't want to hear about it. Every time I talk to you, you know, how are you? And I didn't want the pity
Oh,
look.
don't even go there with
Right.
the, oh my God, with the criers. I
Yeah,
have-
oh, like, dude, you're crying.
Why are you crying? I got the cancer.
I have a 9-year-old grandson that I always tell him that his
Mhm.
feelings is he should be able to validate his feelings when he's angry, when he's mad, when he's upset. I have him validate his feelings because I want him to know it's okay to have those feelings.
Yeah,
But for me, I woke up each morning saying, this is the day that the Lord has made, and I'm going to rejoice in it. And today, I'm going to live my best life today and worry about tomorrow.
you go, girl.
That's what I say every
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
I love it. Wow. Well,
Good to
this
hear.
has been an
Take
amazing
it up, you
show.
guys. I gotta
Oh my
go.
goodness. I know. We're sending virtual hugs and breasty love.
Yeah,
Did we put everybody's contact information and
yeah,
ways
I put it-
in the
yeah.
chat? Dr. Kim, are there
Dr.
people
Kim,
who can
you got
follow
this
you
Yeah. Can we
on
find
social
you?
media? Like, how can people find you?
How can people find me? Well, I mean, the best way to get in touch with me, and no, I'm not on social media, but I have an 888 number. So 888-737-3330. That is a 24.
You
Oh,
gotta
sorry,
say that again.
888-737-3330.
And then I just want to make sure, Ricky, you had
And that is a
mine.
24-hour answering service, so there should be someone to respond to that at any time. And while I am really overbooked with the pandemic, I think most of us are. It really is a struggle. It might be possible to put together groups and group therapy groups. I think are very helpful for breast cancer patients to have the support of one another and drawing from each other's resources.
Great, great. And we actually have some, a great psychotherapist on our medical advisory board, so we can help you. And maybe reach out to you, Dr. Kim, to help people find people in their neighborhood. Dr. Kim's in Maryland, but, we will help people find help, but the key is to say you want help. Say, I need it, I'm ready to talk about it, and I want to do it.
And to know, like, again, if that nurse had ever never said, I wouldn't have known that.
Right.
What
It's an
it is.
option.
It's
an option.
natural, and to know that it's natural. It
Yeah.
really is. Your
And
feelings
there
are
is-
valid.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there is a responsibility of the mental health community, especially as mental health professionals, people of color. Like, we understand that the natural help seeking places are your pastor. We understand that you're going to go to your general practitioner and you're going to think you're having a panic attack or a heart attack before you realize it's stress and anxiety. We do
Yeah.
understand that. And so we are trying to reach out as much as possible to church communities and spiritual communities, and we're going to those natural help seeking spaces and seeing your general practitioner, leaving our cards. I mean, it's something that I do regularly to say, if you have a client that is experiencing stress and anxiety, send them my way. I mean, you know what it is. I know what it is. They might not know. And many times, healthcare professionals and other fields outside of mental health are very receptive. Oh, thank you. Like, oh, thank you so much. That really is needed. But especially for our community, because
Yes.
there is the stereotype that is associated with it.
Yeah.
And so it is our job. We have a responsibility to make sure that we're reaching out to the gatekeepers and natural help, helping places where people of color are going and making our presence known, doing a training, doing a seminar, doing those things. And maybe there aren't enough of us, but we are trying to make those attempts.
Yeah.
And your survivorship, I think it's important for you to bring that up and to bring that to the spaces where you find community as well. Those people who are watching, who are advocates, people who have, gone through therapy and are in therapy, and people who can attest to the fact that therapy can truly save a life. I think you bring that to your support groups and to your cancer centers and your programs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just brought up another point, caregivers. That's a whole nother conversation.
Mhm.
So
Indeed.
Yeah.
thank you so much, you guys.
Oh.
Thank you, Laura, for bringing this to us, and great to hang out with you, Dr. Kim. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for joining us.
I just want to make sure,
pleasure.
Vicki, for my email address, it's L Crandon. Is that the one you shared? L Crandon?
Yeah.
at Touch Your Life?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, just want to make sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's on our page. It is on the video that we're doing here, and we put it into the chat as well. We want you
Yeah.
to get
And
involved.
you can always
Uh,
email me and I'll find these ladies for you.
Exactly right. Well, we hope this has been relatable and reliable and real. That's what we set out to do every Wednesday night here on blackdoctor.org. And we are so thankful to the platform, to the network, to our sponsors, and the Doctors In.
Doctors In. Thank
Love
you
you
very much.
guys.
Thank
Christy
you.
Love.
Breasty love. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Amgen.
Thank you so much.
Bless you. See you next week. Love you, Mo.
Love you too. I miss you guys.
I know.
Mo, I'm coming to your farm when you have your next event.
Whenever you come, we'll have it.
Love
Okay.
you.
Love
Love
you.
you guys. Be blessed, everyone. Be safe
Bye-bye.
and healthy.